Penguin Island by Anatole France. Book 5. Modern Times. Châtillon. Book 5. Chapter 6. The Emerald's Fall. That night marked the culmination of the Dracophile movement. The Royalists had no longer any doubt of its triumph. Their chiefs sent congratulations to Prince Crucho by wireless telegraphy. Their ladies embroidered scarves and slippers for him. Monsieur de Plume had found the green horse. The pious Agaric shared the common hope, but he still worked to win the partisans for the Pretender. They ought, he said, to lay their foundations upon the bedrock. With this design he had an interview with 3 trade union workmen. In these times the artisans no longer lived, as in the days of the Draconides, under the government of corporations. They were free, but they had no assured pay. After having remained isolated from each other for a long time, without help and without support, they had formed themselves into unions. The coffers of the unions were empty, as it was not the habit of the unionists to pay their subscriptions. There were unions numbering 30,000 members, others with 1,000, 500, 200, and so forth. Several numbered 2 or 3 members only, or even a few less. But as the lists of adherents were not published, it was not easy to distinguish the great unions from the small ones. After some dark and indirect steps, the pious Agaric was put into communication, in a room in the Moulin de Galette, with comrades Dagobert, Tronc, and Balafille, the secretaries of 3 unions, of which the first numbered 14 members, the second 24, and the third only 1. Agaric showed extreme cleverness at this interview. "Gentlemen," said he, "you and I have not, in most respects, the same political and social views, but there are points in which we may come to an understanding. We have a common enemy. The government exploits you and despises us. Help us to overthrow it. We will supply you with the means so far as we are able, and you can, in addition, count on our gratitude." "Fork out the tin," said Dagobert. The Reverend Father placed on the table a bag which the distiller of Connels had given him with tears in his eyes. "Done," said the 3 companions. Thus was the solemn compact sealed. As soon as the monk had departed, carrying with him the joy of having won over the masses to his cause, Dagobert, Tronc, and Balafille whistled to their wives, Amelia, Queenie, and Matilda, who were waiting in the street for the signal, and all 6, holding each other's hands, danced around the bag, singing, "J'ai du bon pognon, tu l'aurais pas Châtillon, la calotte," and they ordered a salad bowl full of warm wine. In the evening all 6 went through the street from stall to stall singing their new song. The song became popular, for the detectives reported that every day showed an increase of the number of workpeople who sang through the slums, "J'ai du bon pognon, tu l'aurais pas Châtillon, la calotte." The Dracophile agitation made no progress in the provinces. The pious Agaric sought to find the cause of this, but was unable to discover it until old Cornemuse revealed it to him. "I have proofs," sighed the monk of Connels, "that the Duke of Ampoule, the treasurer of the Dracophiles, has bought property in Porpoisia with the funds that he received for the propaganda." The party wanted money. Prince des Boscénos had lost his portfolio in a brawl, and he was reduced to painful expedients which were repugnant to his impetuous character. The Viscountess Olive was expensive. Cornemuse advised that the monthly allowance of that lady should be diminished. "She is very useful to us," objected the pious Agaric. "Undoubtedly," answered Cornemuse, "but she does us an injury by ruining us." A schism divided the Dracophiles. Misunderstandings reigned in their councils. Some wished that, in accordance with the policy of Monsieur Bigourd and the pious Agaric, they should carry on the design of reforming the public. Others, wearied by their long constraint, had resolved to proclaim the dragon's crest and swore to conquer beneath that sign. The latter encouraged the advantage of a clear situation and the impossibility of making a pretence much longer, and in truth the public began to see whither the agitation was tending, and that the Emiral's partisans wanted to destroy the very foundations of the Republic. A report was spread that the prince was to land at La Cirque and make his entry into Alca on a green horse. These rumours excited the fanatical monks, delighted the poor nobles, satisfied the rich Jewish ladies, and put hope in the hearts of the small traders. But very few of them were inclined to purchase these benefits at the price of a social catastrophe and the overthrow of the public credit, and there were fewer still who would have risked their money, their peace, their liberty, or a single hour from their pleasures in the business. On the other hand, the workmen held themselves ready as ever to give a day's work to the Republic, and a strong resistance was being formed in the suburbs. "The people are with us," the pious Agaric used to say. However, men, women and children, when leaving their factories, used to shout with one voice, "À bas Chatillon! Hou hou la calotte!" As for the government, it showed the weakness, indecision, flabbiness and heedlessness common to all governments, and from which none has ever departed without falling into arbitrariness and violence. In 3 words, it knew nothing, wanted nothing, and would do nothing. Formose, shut in his presidential palace, remained blind, dumb, deaf, huge, invisible, wrapped up in his pride as in an eiderdown. Count Olive advised the Dracophils to make a last appeal for funds and to attempt a great stroke while Alca was still in a ferment. An executive committee, which he himself had chosen, decided to kidnap the members of the Chamber of Deputies and considered ways and means. The affair was fixed for the 28th of July. On that day the sun rose radiantly over the city. In front of the legislative palace women passed to market with their baskets. Hawkers cried their peaches, pears and grapes. Cab horses with their noses in their bags munched their hay. Nobody expected anything, not because the secret had been kept, but because it met with nothing but unbelievers. Nobody believed in a revolution, and from this fact we may conclude that nobody desired one. About 2 o'clock the deputies began to pass, few and unnoticed, through the side door of the palace. At 3 o'clock a few groups of badly dressed men had formed. At 3:30 black masses coming from the adjacent streets spread over Revolution Square. This vast expanse was soon covered by an ocean of soft hats, and the crowd of demonstrators, continually increased by sightseers, having crossed the bridge, struck its dark wave against the walls of the legislative enclosure. Cries, murmurs and songs went up to the impassive sky.
Down with the deputies! Down with the Republicans! Death to the Republicans!
The devoted band of Dracophils, led by Prince des Boscénos, struck up the august canticle. Behind the wall silence alone replied. The silence and the absence of guards encouraged and at the same time frightened the crowd. Suddenly a formidable voice cried out, "Attack!" and Prince des Boscénos was seen raising his gigantic form to the top of the wall, which was covered with barbs and iron spikes. Behind him rushed his companions, and the people followed. Some hammered against the wall to make holes in it. Others endeavoured to tear down the spikes and pull out the barbs. These defences had given way in places, and some of the invaders had stripped the wall and were sitting astride on the top. Prince des Boscénos was waving an immense green flag. Suddenly the crowd wavered, and from it came a long cry of terror. The police and the Republican carabineers, issuing out of all of the entrances of the palace, formed themselves into a column beneath the wall, and in a moment it was cleared of its besiegers. After a long moment of suspense the noise of arms was heard, and the police charged the crowd with fixed bayonets. An instant afterwards, and on the deserted square, strewn with hats and walking sticks, there reigned a sinister silence. Twice again the Dracophils attempted to form. Twice they were repulsed. The rising was conquered, but Prince des Boscénos, standing on the wall of the hostile palace, his flag in his hand, still repelled the attack of a whole brigade. He knocked down all who approached him. At last he too was thrown down and fell on an iron spike, to which he remained hooked, still clasping the standard of the Draconides. On the following day the ministers of the Republic and the members of Parliament determined to take energetic measures. In vain this time did President Formose attempt to evade his responsibilities. The government discussed the question of depriving Chatillon of his rank and dignities, and of indicting him before the High Court as a conspirator, an enemy of the public good, a traitor, etc. At this news the Emiral's old companions in arms, who the very evening before had beset him with their adulations, made no effort to conceal their joy. But Chatillon remained popular with the middle classes of Alca, and one still heard the hymn of the liberators sounding in the streets, "It is Chatillon we want." The ministers were embarrassed. They intended to indict Chatillon before the High Court, but they knew nothing. They remained in that total ignorance reserved for those who govern men. They were incapable of advancing any grave charges against Chatillon. They could supply the prosecution with nothing but the ridiculous lies of their spies. Chatillon's share in the plot and his relations with Prince Crucho remained the secret of the 30,000 Dracophils. The ministers and the deputies had suspicions and even certainties, but they had no proofs. The public prosecutor said to the Minister of Justice, "Very little is needed for a political prosecution, but I have nothing at all, and that is not enough." The affair made no progress. The enemies of the Republic were triumphant. On the 18th of September the news ran in Alca that Chatillon had taken flight. Everywhere there was surprise and astonishment. People doubted, for they could not understand. This is what had happened. One day, as the brave Under-Emiral Vulcanmould happened, as if by chance, to go into the office of M. Barbotan, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, he remarked with his usual frankness, "Monsieur Barbotan, your colleagues do not seem to me to be up to much. It is evident that they have never commanded a ship. That fool Chatillon gives them a deuced bad fit of the shivers." The minister, in sign of denial, waved his paper knife in the air above his desk. "I don't deny it," answered Vulcanmould. "You don't know how to get rid of Chatillon. You do not dare to indict him before the High Court because you are not sure of being able to bring forward a strong enough charge. Bigourd will defend him, and Bigourd is a clever advocate. You are right, Monsieur Barbotan. You are right. It would be a dangerous trial." "Ah, my good friend," said the minister in a careless tone, "if you knew how satisfied we are. I receive the most reassuring news from my prefects. The good sense of the Penguins will do justice to the intrigues of this mutinous soldier. Can you suppose for a moment that a great people, an intelligent, laborious people, devoted to liberal institutions, which—" Vulcanmould interrupted with a great sigh. "Ah! If I had time to do it, I would relieve you of your difficulty. I would juggle away my Chatillon like a nutmeg out of a thimble. I would fillip him off to Porpoisia." The minister paid close attention. "It would not take long," continued the sailor. "I would rid you in a trice of the creature. But just now I have other fish to fry. I am in a bad hole. I must find a pretty big sum. But deuce take it, honour before everything." The minister and Under-Emiral looked at each other for a moment in silence. Then Barbotan said with authority, "Under-Emiral Vulcanmould, get rid of this seditious soldier. You will render a great service to Penguinia, and the Minister of Home Affairs will see that your gambling debts are paid." The same evening Vulcanmould called on Chatillon and looked at him for some time with an expression of grief and mystery. "Why do you look like that?" asked the Emiral in an uneasy tone. Vulcanmould said to him sadly, "Old brother in arms, all is discovered. For the past half hour the government knows everything." At these words Chatillon sank down overwhelmed. Vulcanmould continued, "You may be arrested at any moment. I advise you to make off." And drawing out his watch, "Not a minute to lose." Have I time to call on the Viscountess Olive?" "It would be mad," said Vulcanmould, handing him a passport and a pair of blue spectacles and telling him to have courage. "I will," said Chatillon. "Good bye, old chum." "Good bye, and thanks. You have saved my life." "That is the least I could do." A quarter of an hour later the brave Emiral had left the city of Alca. He embarked that night on an old cutter at La Cirque and set sail for Porpoisia. But 8 miles from the coast he was captured by a despatch boat, which was sailing without lights and which was under the flag of the Queen of the Black Islands. That queen had for a long time nourished a fatal passion for Chatillon. End of Book 5, Chapter 6.